Imagine, just days before your wedding you vanish without a trace. That's exactly what happened to Mary Virginia Carpenter in Denton, Texas in 1948. Was it a calculated runaway, a terrifying abduction? Or something far more sinister involving those she trusted most? We're diving deep into conflicting accounts and the chilling silence surrounding her fate. Searching for answers to a cold case that's baffled investigators for over 75 years. Welcome to Case Files of the Missing, where the search for answers does not end with time. Please like, comment, and subscribe. On a warm summer evening in Denton, Texas, in 1948, a young woman stepped off a train carrying the ordinary weight of a new beginning. She had luggage. She had a destination. She had a room number written down. What she did not have, at least not for long, was a future anyone could follow. Her name was Mary Virginia Carpenter, known to friends and family as Jimmie. She was 21 years old, traveling alone, and preparing to enroll in summer classes at Texas State College for Women. She arrived in Denton just after dark. Within hours, she vanished. No confirmed dorm check-in. No verified enrollment. No letter home. No trace. What followed was not a single moment of violence witnessed in the open, but something far more difficult to untangle. A disappearance that unfolded quietly in fragments, shaped by assumptions, missed signals, and a narrow window of time that closed before anyone realized it mattered. This is not a story about a body found in the woods or a crime scene frozen in place. This is a story about silence, and about how easily a young woman could step into that silence in 1948 and never step back out. Mary Virginia Carpenter grew up in Texarkana, Texas, in a close-knit family that described her as outgoing, thoughtful, and determined to build a future that felt meaningful. Friends and relatives often called her Jimmie, a nickname that followed her into adulthood and appears again and again in recollections of her life. She was not someone drifting without direction. In fact, her path showed a pattern of reassessment and quiet resilience. Carpenter had previously attended the University of Arkansas, where she studied journalism, a field that reflected her curiosity and strong communication skills. But somewhere along the way her goals shifted. She began looking toward a more technical and practical profession and made the decision to change course academically. That choice led her to Texas State College for Women in Denton, where she intended to pursue studies in the sciences and eventually train as a laboratory technician. Her connection to the campus was not new. Mary Virginia had first enrolled at Texas State College for Women during the 1945-1946 school year. Life, however, intervened. She stepped away from school to help care for her sick mother and to work so she could save money for tuition and living expenses. During that period, she attended Texarkana Junior College for a time, balancing education with family responsibility and financial realities. By 1948, she was ready to return to Denton and continue the plan she had paused. She enrolled in the summer term at Texas State College for Women with the intention of beginning formal laboratory technician training in the autumn. It was not a spontaneous decision. It was a return to a path she had already begun building years earlier. Physically, Mary Virginia carried reminders of earlier health struggles. A previous bone infection in her hip left her with a slight limp and surgical scars. Around the time she traveled to Denton, she was also recovering from a severe sunburn, details that later became part of how investigators described her. These were not dramatic traits, but they paint a picture of someone who understood hardship and still moved forward with purpose. In her personal life, she had recently experienced emotional change. A prior engagement had ended before the wedding took place. A development that added complexity to how some observers would later interpret her disappearance. But nothing about her preparations suggested she intended to abandon her life. She packed carefully. She traveled openly. She carried plans with her, not just hopes, but specific academic goals tied to a future career. When Mary Virginia Carpenter boarded the train for Denton in June of 1948, she wasn't running away from something. She was moving toward something, toward education, stability, and a new professional identity. And that makes what happened next feel even more unsettling. Because everything about who she was points to a young woman stepping into a future she intended to claim. Just days before that future vanished with her. On June 1, 1948, Mary Virginia boarded a train in Texarkana bound for Dallas, with Denton as her final stop. During the journey, she struck up a conversation with another passenger, Marjorie Webster, a school teacher also traveling to enroll at Texas State College for Women. Their meeting was casual, unplanned, and significant only because it provided a neutral witness, someone who had no prior connection to Mary Virginia and no reason to shape the story in her favor or against her. When the train arrived in Denton that evening, both women shared a taxi to the campus. The driver, Edgar Ray Jack Zachary, first dropped Marjorie at her dormitory before continuing on to Brackenridge Hall, where Mary Virginia had been assigned a room. But as they arrived, Mary Virginia realized something was wrong. Her trunk, an essential piece of her luggage, had not arrived with her. Rather than ignoring the issue, she chose to address it immediately. She asked the driver to take her back to the train station to locate the missing trunk. Marjorie offered to accompany her. Mary Virginia declined. She said she would be fine on her own. The taxi returned to the station where Mary Virginia spoke with a railroad employee. The trunk had not yet arrived. Arrangements were made for the driver to retrieve it later and deliver it directly to her dormitory. At that moment, Mary Virginia did something important. She signed the back of her claim check. She wrote her name clearly. She wrote her dormitory location, room 200 Brackenridge Hall, and she paid for the additional delivery. These are not the actions of someone disappearing on impulse. They are the actions of someone expecting to return. The taxi then drove her back to the dormitory. It was approximately 9:30 p.m. As the taxi pulled up to Brackenridge Hall, the scene was quiet. Streetlights in the area were reportedly out due to repairs. The night was dark. Visibility was limited. According to the driver, a light-colored convertible, described as yellow or cream, was parked near the entrance. Two young men stood nearby, one tall, one shorter, and heavier in build. Mary Virginia stepped out of the taxi. The driver later stated that she approached the men and spoke to them in a manner that suggested familiarity, asking something along the lines of what they were doing there, and then the taxi left. That is the final moment of Mary Virginia Carpenter's life that can be placed on solid ground. What happened next, whether she entered the dorm, whether she left with the men, whether she remained nearby has never been conclusively established. There was no confirmed dorm sign-in. No witness who saw her walk inside. No record of her checking into her assigned room. She simply vanished from the record. Days passed. Mary Virginia did not call home. She did not write, she did not contact friends. Her boyfriend at the time, Kenny Branham, attempted to reach her and failed. Concerned, he contacted her mother in Texarkana. Her mother then contacted the college. What she learned was devastating. Mary Virginia had never enrolled. She had never registered for classes. She had never officially checked into the dormitory. And yet her luggage told a different story. Her trunk was eventually delivered to Brackenridge Hall and left outside on the lawn for several days unclaimed. Later, it was moved inside. No one raised an immediate alarm. No one connected the unclaimed luggage to a missing student. By the time authorities were formally engaged, the most critical window had already closed. When law enforcement began searching, they did so extensively. Ground searches, aerial searches, waterways, roadways, all were examined, but there was no clear starting point. No confirmed crime scene, no confirmed direction of travel. No definitive evidence of foul play. The case leaned heavily on witness recollections, particularly those of the taxi driver. He cooperated with authorities and later passed polygraph testing. However, years later, questions emerged about his timeline that night, when his wife reportedly recanted an earlier statement regarding when he returned home. That shift did not prove wrongdoing, but it introduced uncertainty. And in a case built on so little, uncertainty looms large. The investigation also struggled with what was missing. Mary Virginia's handbag, often described as red, was never recovered. Whether she left with it or whether it was discarded remains unknown. There was no note, no message, no confirmed destination beyond the dormitory. Some suggested Mary Virginia ran away, driven by emotional strain following the broken engagement. But the facts resist that narrative. She traveled openly. She brought luggage. She arranged for her trunk. She provided her dorm address in writing. Running away typically requires secrecy. Mary Virginia left a paper trail. Others believe she encountered danger near the dormitory, possibly involving the men by the convertible. The setting supports the possibility: darkness, unfamiliar surroundings, and a brief interaction that may have turned unsafe. But there was no confirmed struggle. No witnesses heard distress. No demands followed. Only absence. Some theories point inward, to acquaintances, romantic connections, or people who knew her routines. But opportunity is the limiting factor. Whoever was involved had to be present in Denton that night within minutes of her arrival. That narrows the field dramatically, and also explains why this case has never expanded cleanly beyond that moment. In the months and years that followed, sightings were reported across Texas and beyond. A gas station in Aubrey, a bus station in Arkansas, later claims from farther west. Each report sparked hope, and each ultimately collapsed under scrutiny. Sightings in missing persons cases often reflect publicity more than truth. Faces blur, details overlap. Memory reshapes itself. None of the sightings led to confirmation. None produced evidence. Over the years, remains were found and briefly considered. None matched. A later tip suggested Mary Virginia might be buried near the campus. Excavation produced nothing conclusive. The case aged, witnesses died, memories faded. The world moved on. But the question did not. For Mary Virginia's family, the absence never resolved. There was no moment of certainty, no grief with an ending. Only waiting. Mary Virginia Carpenter did not disappear into legend. She disappeared into a gap between a taxi pulling away and a dormitory door that never opened. Her case remains unsolved not because it lacks importance, but because it was shaped by early assumptions, lost time, and an era without modern safeguards. And that means one thing remains true. Someone, somewhere may still know what happened. A story told once and never repeated. A memory set aside. A detail dismissed as insignificant. Cold cases do not stay cold because the truth vanishes. They stay cold because the truth stays quiet. Mary Virginia Carpenter arrived in Denton with plans. She had a room. She had classes ahead of her. She had a future that made sense. She stepped out of a taxi on June 1st, 1948, and was never seen again. If you care about missing persons cases, unresolved disappearances, and cold cases that still deserve answers, this is why stories like Mary Virginia's must continue to be told. Because silence is not closure. And somewhere between that train platform and the darkened street outside Brackenridge Hall, the truth is still waiting to be spoken. This is Case Files of the Missing, where the search for answers does not end with time. For more intriguing missing person and cold case stories, please like, comment, and subscribe.